Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everyone. So today for TSLB3123, my group, which consists of me, Ilham, Azrie bin Fuad, and also my partner, Mustaqim bin Mustafa, will present our findings for the task of analyzing three literary texts using literary criticism theory that we have chosen, which is feminist criticism. Alright, so first things first, the three literary texts that we have chosen for this assignment. Right, so the first one is a short story by Charlotte Perkins Gilman entitled The Yellow Wallpaper. Next is a novel, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And the last one is Diving into the Wreck by Adrienne Rich, which is a poem. Alright, moving on to the first literary text that we have chosen, The Yellow Wallpaper. Alright, so what is it about? Okay, so The Yellow Wallpaper is actually a short story by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, published in 1892. So in the story, it tells the story of a woman who is suffering from postpartum depression and is confined to a room in the attic of a country house by her own husband, who is a physician, who believes that rest and isolation are the best treatment for the condition that the woman is facing. So from this, the woman becomes increasingly obsessed with the pattern of the yellow wallpaper in the room and begins to see it as a symbol of her own confinement and oppression. So as her mental state deteriorates while being kept captive in a room with this yellow wallpaper, she begins to see women trapped in the yellow wallpaper. And as the story goes on, she begins to identify the women as her. She is being trapped in the wallpaper. So in the end, she ultimately tears down the whole wallpaper frantically, like in a fit of madness, freeing both herself and the woman that she believes is trapped within the wallpaper. So this story is often interpreted as a critique of the medical profession's treatment of women's mental health, and as a feminist allegory for the struggle of women to gain autonomy and self-expression in a patriarchal society. Alright, so based from the short story just now, from the perspective of feminist criticism, we have found that the short story depicts women as the oppressed gender. Alright, so in the story, it shows how the protagonist, a woman who is suffering from postpartum depression, is oppressed and trapped by societal expectations of women. The narrator's confinement to a room with a yellow wallpaper, which she describes as committing every artistic sin, represents the oppressive structures of patriarchal society that restrict women's creativity, thoughts, and self-expression. So for the textual evidence, I never saw a worse paper in my life. One of those sprawling, flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. It is dull enough to confuse the eye in following, pronounced enough to constantly irritate and provoke study, and when you follow the lame, uncertain curves for a little distance, they suddenly commit suicide, plunge off at outrageous angles, destroy themselves in unheard of contradictions. Alright. So, in this excerpt, we are hearing her thoughts, which she sees these wallpaper design as something that is very depressing to her, because right now she is being confined in a room by her own husband. So this shows that she did not even have a say, did not even have a right to her own health. Even though it is her husband, even her husband does not give her a say in the decision of keeping her captive in this particular room. So this shows that women at that time are the oppressed gender, are the second gender that has less rights than they do now. So this is a display of that in the short story. Alright, so next point is typical Victorian gender roles. So in this story, it also critiques the idea of angel in the house, the typical angel in the house idea. So in the Victorian era, this concept, it idealized women as selfless domestic beings who existed solely to serve their husbands and families. So the protagonist's husband, John, he embodies this ideal, and he insists that his wife must rest and refrain from intellectual activity. The story shows how this idealization of women is harmful and ultimately leads to the protagonist's mental breakdown. Okay. So John, he embodies this ideal as she refrains the protagonist from giving her thoughts, from expressing her thoughts about her own condition, which is quite absurd, to be honest. And also, John is the typical Victorian era husband, which is he is the breadwinner, he is the decision maker, while the wife barely has any rights, barely has any choice but to be a wife, a good wife to the husband. So for the textual evidence, John is practical in the extreme. He has no patience with faith, an intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. John is a physician, and perhaps I will not say it to a living soul, of course, but this is dead paper and a great relief to my mind. Perhaps that is one reason I do not get well faster. Okay, so we can see that in here that the protagonist is expressing about how his husband does not accept her thoughts and ideas about what she is seeing, about what she is feeling inside. And his husband, John, just insists on going on his own methods, which is making her rest, making her wife rest, and then finding her in a room. She thinks that this will make the wife better, but she did not. The husband did not listen to what the wife has to say, because apparently this John has a stand and also an ego, I might say. Some might say. So he does not listen to his wife. So that is a typical Victorian gender roles, where the men and the women are different genders, which has different typical gender roles. Alright, next is women are depicted as objects of possession. Excuse me. Okay, so in the story, it highlights that the way that women's bodies are objectified and controlled by men. The protagonist's confinement, to the room and the restrictions placed on her movements and activities reflects the way that women's bodies have been historically policed and controlled by men. So in the story, we can see that she is confined in the room out of her own will. She is instructed by the husband to do what he says and not to have any opinions, not to have any intellectual things. Don't do any intellectual things. You should only be doing things that a wife should do, which is, we can say, being pretty, serving the husband, and so on. So for the textual evidence, I must not let John find me writing. I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. So we can see that the protagonist is scared of having John finding out about her writing this journal, which shows that John has this complete control of the protagonist, the woman, the wife. It shows that I must not let John find me writing. He hates to have me write a word. Even a word, even writing is refrained for the woman to do at that time. So this shows that women are women are depicted as objects by the men, an object of possession which they can control and refrain and give orders to. Alright, so now moving on to the next literary text, which is novel. Novel The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. Okay, so how about this novel? What is it about? Right, so The Bell Jar is a semi-autobiographical novel by Sylvia Plath, which follows the experiences of Esther Greenwood, a young woman who is struggling with her identity and societal expectations in the 1950s in the United States. Okay, so Esther Greenwood is a young woman from a working class family who wins a summer internship at a prestigious fashion magazine in New York City. However, as Esther is living and going through experiences in the city, combined with her growing disillusionment with the expectation placed on women in the United States at that time, it begins to take a toll on her mental health. All these things combined in juggling inside her mind. So, as the story progresses, she becomes increasingly isolated and withdrawn, and ultimately attempts suicide. So the novel follows Esther's journey through various mental health treatments and her struggle to come to terms with her own identity and place in the world. So Plath's deeply personal and autobiographical novel has been depicted as a critique of the limited opportunities and societal pressures faced by women in the mid-20th century, and it is quite a powerful portrayal of the complexities of mental illness and its treatment for women at that time. Alright, so based on this story, from the perspective of feminist criticism, we have found that in the story, it shows that women, they have limited choices. They are limited in the 1950s. So the protagonist, Esther Greenwood, who is a young woman, feels trapped by societal expectations of women to be wives and mothers. The novel shows how these narrow roles are suffocating and limit women's opportunities for personal growth and fulfillment. So as we know, Esther, she is choosing this path of having a career instead of the typical path of being a mother, being a caregiver, being a wife. So she chose this, you can say, an alienated path for women at that time. So for the textual evidence, I saw my life branching out before me, like the green fig tree in the story. You can picture it. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. So this is a metaphor of how she is confused. She is suffocated by wanting to achieve this dream, and also having this societal pressure coming over her constantly. So she is also thinking about how she will have consequences. She has consequences for the things that she chose. So this shows that women at that time have limited choices, are limited to their path of being a wife and a mother in the 1950s.
Okay, so next, the feminist criticism issues that related to this short story, which is The Belja by Sylvia Plath, is double standards of gender roles. So, in this short story, women are held to different expectations than men. So, Esther struggles with the idea that she must choose between being a wife and mother or a career woman, while men are not held to the same restriction and expectation. Esther compares the role of women as shadows behind the success of men. Okay, so the textual evidence that we get from this short story is, I thought the most beautiful thing in the world must be shadow, the million moving shapes and curled these sets of shadows. There was shadow in bureaus, drawers and closets and suitcases, and shadow under houses and trees and stones, and shadow at the back of people's eye and smiles, and shadow miles and miles of it on the night side of the earth. So here, in the Belgia by Sylvia Plath, the parenting expectations placed on women are portrayed through the character of Esther Greenwood, which is the main character. Throughout the novel, Esther struggles with the pressure to conform to traditional gender roles, including the expectation that she will become a wife and mother. Despite her reservation about marriage and motherhood, Esther feels that she is expected to prioritize these roles above all else. She struggles with the idea that her worth as a woman is tied to her ability to bear children and care for them. She sees her future as a bleak and suffocating existence, where she is trapped in a domestic role and unable to pursue her own interests or ambition. So basically, the novel also depicts the double standard that exists when it comes to parenting expectation for men and women. While Esther feels that she is expected to prioritize her maternal responsibilities, the men in the novel are not held to the same standard. For example, Buddy Willard, which is Esther's former boyfriend, is praised for his medical career and encouraged to pursue his dreams. He is not expected to prioritize his role as a father or caregiver. So in that case, Esther struggles with the parenting expectation placed on women is a central theme of the novel. It highlights the limitation that women face in the 1950s and the pressure to conform to traditional gender roles. So basically, it also demonstrates how this expectation can contribute to feeling of anxiety, depression, and also dissatisfaction with one's life. So next, the last point for feminist criticism that occurs in this short story is the diminishment of a woman's value. So the novel also highlights the way that women's bodies are objectified and judged by men. Esther struggles with her own self-image and the pressure to conform to societal beauty standards, as well as the pressure to be sexually attractive to men, as if that is all there is of a woman. So the sexual evidence that related to this point is that the trouble was I had been inadequate all along. I simply had not thought about it. The idea of being a woman and loving it was a new concept to me, and I wanted to believe it. I wanted badly to ratify this new feminine love affair I was having with myself. So, in the short story, this it explores the diminishment of a woman's value in several ways. One of the main ways this is explored is through the protagonist, which is Esther Greenwood, and her experience in a patriarchal society that limits women's opportunities to reinforce gender stereotypes. So, firstly, the novels explore the ways in which women are expected to conform to narrow beauty standards in order to be valued in society. So, Esther, the main character, is constantly worried about her appearance and feels pressure to look a certain way in order to be accepted. This is evident when she describes herself in the short story as ugly and is obsessed with her weight, believing that she is only valuable if she is thin and attractive. The novel also portrays how women are often judged more harshly for their appearance than men, and how this can contribute to feelings of insecurity and doubt. So that is all the point for feminist criticism in The Bell's Jar by Sylvia Plath. So next we are going to take a look at the poem entitled Diving into the Wreck by Adrian Rich. So what is it about the poem? So the poem Diving into the Wreck by Adrian Rich is a poem that uses the metaphor of exploring a shipwreck to uncover the remnants of a patriarchal society. The speaker descends into the depths of the ocean to navigate the wreckage, reflecting on the struggles and sacrifices of those who came before her, and the need for women to claim their place in history. Through vivid imagery and a sense of danger, the poem conveys the courage and the determination required to confront the obstacles that lie in our way, and suggests that by exploring the past, we can move towards a more just and equitable future. So that is the poem is all about. So basically, the poem Diving into the Wreck is a poem by Adrian Rich, which is published in 1973. It is a powerful and thought-provoking work that explores themes of identity, transformation, and the search for truth. So basically, the poem is about a woman who goes scuba diving to explore a sunken shipwreck. As she encounters obstacles and tries to uncover the truth about the wreck, she also reflects on her own identity and place in the world. So the poem ends with the idea of transformation as the woman sheds her scuba gear and becomes more aware of herself and her surroundings. Okay, so the first point that related to feminist criticism that occurred in the poem Diving into the Wreck is dominant patriarchal systems. The poem critiques patriarchal systems that limit women's opportunities for personal and creative fulfillment. The speaker of the poem is a woman who dives into the ocean to explore a shipwreck, which can be read as a metaphor for exploring the depth of her own consciousness and the limitations placed on her by society. So the textual evidence is, I go down, rank after rank and still. The oxygen immerses me, the blue light, the clear atoms of our human air. I go down, my flippers cripple me. I crawl like an insect down the ladder, and there is no one to tell me when the ocean will begin. So, in diving into the wreck, the fact that the speaker of the poem is a woman who is exploring the wreck alone can be seen as a powerful statement about women's struggle for independence and autonomy in a society that has historically been dominated by men. So, as all we know, traditionally, scuba diving has been seen as a male-dominated activity, and the idea of a woman going on a diving expedition alone would have been unusual and even frowned upon in some circles. So, by choosing to make the speaker of the poem a woman who is exploring the wreck alone, Rich, which is the writer, is making a statement about women's right to pursue their own interests and passion, regardless of what society may think. Uh, Furthermore, the fact that the woman is exploring the right alone can be seen as a symbol of women's struggle to gain independence and agency in a world that has historically been controlled by men. So, this poem suggests that women need to be willing to take risks and venture into uncharted territory in order to find their own path in life. So, in the poem, in this poem, diving into the wreck, by portraying the woman as a skilled and capable diver, Rich is challenging traditional gender roles and suggesting that women are just as capable as men in of exploring the world and discovering new things. This can be seen as a powerful assertion of the need for women to claim their own agency and independence and to challenge the patriarchal system that have traditionally held them back. So that is the first point of feminist criticism, which is dominant patriarchal system. So next, the second point of feminist criticism in this poem is knowledge dominated by men. So, the poem also explores the relationship between power and knowledge and suggests that women's experience and perspectives have been marginalized by dominant patriarchal systems. The speaker seeks to reclaim knowledge and power that have been lost or hidden, and to use this knowledge to challenge and transform the existing structures of power. So the textual evidence that we get from the poem is "We are, I am, you are" by Cowardice or Courage, the one who find our way back to this scene, carrying a knife, a camera, a book of myths in which our names do not appear. So, in the textual evidence, we can see that the speaker's use of a camera in the poem can be seen as a powerful symbol of the ways in which knowledge had traditionally been constructed and transmitted in patriarchal societies. So, throughout the history, written text and other forms of documentation have been used to preserve and transmit knowledge, and this form of documentation have often been controlled by men. So, by using a camera to document her observation of the wreck, the speaker is challenging this tradition and asserting her own right to document and interpret the world around her. The camera, as a tool of visual documentation, allows the speaker to capture images of the wreck that are personal and subjective, and to create a visual narrative of her experience that is not necessarily bound by traditional modes of documentation. Furthermore, the use of a camera in the textual evidence also implies a certain level of urgency and control over the act of documentation. So back in the history, in a patriarchal society, women have often been excluded from position of power and knowledge, and their perspective and experience have often been marginalized or erased. So by using camera, the speaker is asserting her own right to document and interpret her experience, and to challenge traditional ways of thinking and documenting knowledge. So, thus, the speaker's use of the use of a camera in the poem "Diving into the Wreck" can be seen as a powerful statement about the need for women to reclaim their own stories and perspective, and to challenge traditional modes and documentation and knowledge construction that have historically been dominated by men. So that is the second point, which is knowledge dominated by men. Okay, so next is the last point that related to feminist criticism in this poem. So the point that related to feminist criticism in this poem is women are silenced. So women are silenced and excluded from public discourse. The speaker is exploring the shipwreck alone, without any guidance or support, and this can be read as a metaphor for the isolation and also alienation that women experience when they are excluded from public spaces and also conversation. So, in the poem, it is clearly stated regarding to this issue is that I came to explore the right. The words are purposes. The words are maps. I came to see the damage that was done and the treasure that prevailed. I stroked the beam of my lamp slowly along the flank of something more permanent than fish or wheat. So, these lines from the diving into the wreck relate to the idea of women being silenced and their stories being erased in the poem. The speaker's journey to explore the wreck can be seen as a metaphor for the journey of women to uncover their hidden histories and stories that have been lost or forgotten. So the words that the speaker used to describe her journey, for example like purposes and maps, can be interpreted as a way of asserting her own agency and control over the act of documentation. This is important because women's perspective and experience have often been excluded from official histories and cultural narratives, and their stories have been silenced or marginalized. So, besides the speaker desire to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail, like I quoted in the poem just now, can be seen as a way of acknowledging the ways in which women's stories and contributions have been erased or minimized throughout history, but also as a way of asserting the importance and value of these stories and contributions. So, by exploring the wreck and documenting her observations, the speaker is reclaiming the voice and stories of women that have been lost or silenced. So next, what we discover that related to this point is the image of the speaker stroking the beam of her lamp slowly along the flank of something more permanent than fish or wheat can be seen as a way of how the writer emphasized the importance and durability of these stories and perspectives. Even though they have been submerged and forgotten, they are still present and enduring, waiting to be uncovered, brought to the surface. So that is the last point that related to feminist criticism. So I think that is all from us. Thank you.